Hello, everyone. This is Howard Fox, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series, the podcast that celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Andrew Lewin is our guest today. Andrew is a marine biologist and the host of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Andrew, it's a pleasure to meet you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Howard. It's so great to be on the show.
Fantastic. And I'm a little bit nervous now. I'm on the show with another podcaster, and there's this thing in the coaching profession called limiting beliefs, but it's like I'll get through that. But
you are amazing already. I've listened to a few of your episodes beforehand. It sounds great. We podcasters, they have to support each other, right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I think for both of us, we should give a shout out to the great folks at PodMatch, which is a source for many of our guests, or to be a guest on a podcast. And we'll provide links back in our show notes, because you and I both benefit from meeting some great people. So first off, you got a great voice, by the way. Did you bump up the bass, or?
I did nothing. It's weird. People have said that before. It's like before I start, I sound something, and then as soon as you hit record, my voice hits. It's like a natural tendency. I don't know what it is. I have no idea.
All right, very cool. Well, listen, before we get into the podcasting and how to protect the ocean, this passion of yours, I'd love if you could share with our audience a little bit about your background. The fact, marine biologist, that's nothing to snicker at. That's in this day and age, that's a huge responsibility.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it is, and it's kind of funny because I call myself a marine biologist, and some people are like, "Well, you're a marine biologist, but you actually don't work in marine biology per se." And marine biology is such a diverse field. You can go into the science of it all. Like, marine biology is technically the study of biological entities and organisms within the marine realm, within the ocean. I study those in a different way now. I communicate those, and we can discuss how I got there in a minute. But when I first started, when I was a young boy watching Jacques Cousteau documentaries on TV, growing up in Toronto, Ontario, surrounded by the Great Lakes, but not by the ocean. So never had that salt taste until I was about 9 or 10 when we went to Florida for a vacation with the family. But I always loved that just being submerged in the water and looking at the animals and how they're behaving and how they're interacting with like a coral reef or a seagrass bed or a mangrove forest or whatever that might be, whatever I was watching. And it might be a marine mammal, it might be a shark. All those things just got me going. And it wasn't one particular animal by any means. Although I think when you grow up, you just think you're going to be working with dolphins and whales and sharks and all that kind of stuff, as everybody does. But it was always a dream of mine since I was 14. It was like, once I figured out that, I can actually do this as a living. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. And from then on, I was a pain in the butt to my teachers, my biology teachers, because they kept wanting to teach me human biology and I kept wanting to know animal biology. So it's like, okay, do a project on humans in this sort of way. I'm like, yeah, can I do that? But for dolphins, like, can I just switch it up a little bit? And they're like, all right, Andrew, yeah, like, no problem. You could do that. Like, we could figure that out. So it was always like that fascination to study the ocean, to know more about the ocean. And so I went to university, got my degree, my undergraduate degree. I ended up working I go back and forth between freshwater just because of where I live, right? In Toronto. It's difficult to move to a place and then work. But I did get the opportunity in 2022 to go to the Gulf of Mexico in Louisiana. I was stationed out of Louisiana, out of LUMCON, the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, a great, I would say, smallish to medium institute down in southern Louisiana. And we would take a boat, the RV Pelican, and we would go out. I was the marine technician on the boat, and we would go out for weeks in the Gulf of Mexico, and I would live on the ocean on a boat doing what I was meant to do. I was like, this is life. Like, this is amazing. And so we were doing CTD casts, which is like measuring water quality and temperature and salinity and depth from various depths. Like, I think the furthest depth I went down was 3,000 feet, which is crazy. It took an hour and a half to go down and up. And so that was kind of fun. And you get to see all like countless sunsets on the water and stuff. I did that for like 8 months, and I realized it's a very lonely thing to do, to be out on the ocean. And I had a girlfriend at the time who's now my wife. And so you start to realize like how this field really affects your life. Like
Right.
when you're a marine biologist, um, you're a marine biologist for life. Like
Hmm.
there's no off for a lot of us, there's no off switch. You go
Hmm.
home and you're still talking about animals, you're still talking about work, you might be thinking about work. And that happens with a lot of professions and stuff like that. But with this, it's like you're almost always on. And you get burnt out really quick. There's a lot of people in our profession that do get burnt out because they're just
Okay.
always on. It's not a very well paying job in certain situations, but you get the benefit of having these wonderful experiences, like to
Yeah.
live on an ocean and on this wonderful research vessel, to have access to all these instruments. And the job that I had, we'd bring on researchers, and
Right.
you're interacting with the various researchers from all over the world. One of the greatest things that I was able to do on that ship was we picked up naval, it was like reservist SEAL teams.
Hmm.
So like they were SEALs, but they were like the reservists of the SEALs, which I didn't even know they had. These
Okay.
guys were huge and like built like bricks, and you're just like, how are you doing? And they go out on the water and they would measure, like they were looking at how clear the water is, because they're looking for sea mines and all that kind of stuff from World War II, and they're doing all these exercises and stuff. Really cool thing. So a lot of interest in that. But again, like the pay is okay. You're living in a remote town. There was
Hmm.
like one road in this town where I was living, Cocodrie, Louisiana. So it's a very unique kind of step. Not all jobs in marine biology are that isolated, but
Hmm.
this one was. So I ended up moving back. I did my master's degree. I realized like this is what I wanted to do. Did my master's degree in marine protected areas. I was like, oh, this is something that I feel like I could really do.
Okay.
Never, like after I did my master's, I got like my GIS, geographic information. So
Right.
digital mapping, which is a huge thing at the time. It was really catching on now. Now it seems like everybody has to have that to be able to do any kind of research or any type of monitoring. And then from then on, I just had like these different jobs. I was staying, we decided, my wife and I decided to stay in Ontario to raise our family because it was
Hmm.
close to other families. And so it was a little bit, it's a bigger challenge to find a job in marine biology. I was able to find it in private consulting, environmental consulting, which was great. Sometimes nonprofit organizations. And then I found a government job with the federal government here in Canada in Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and working in the Great Lakes. So back to the Great Lakes, back to freshwater, which was great. Had an opportunity to do something when I was when I was doing the private consulting, and just before I went to fisheries and oceans, I decided that um, it was something that was very different. I started to talk to people about the ocean, and this
Hmm.
is around BP oil spill
Right.
or in the Gulf of Mexico, which was still like I always have some emotions tied to the Gulf of Mexico because it kind of capitalized my career.
Sure.
And I know that before the interview, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. You talk about the aha moment. I remember talking to people about that, and they're like, "Yeah, like." And you're like, "Is this climate change like a big deal? Like, should we be worried?" This is family and friends that are asking me this, and I was like, "How do you not know? Like, how do you not know it's a big deal? Like, how do you not know plastic pollution is a big deal or
Hmm.
overfishing is a big deal?" And I quickly realized that there weren't as many readily available resources. Even though the internet and social media had started to take off, there wasn't as many readily available resources for people to gain access to. And that's when I just launched my science communication career on my own. And that's how it's been ever since.
I love that. And I love the trajectory, which by the way, we've covered about 4 out of the 7 questions
Sorry.
that I had for you. But it's like,
We'll figure something else out.
hey, yeah, I mean, as a good podcast host, I know when to let my guests go. And by the way, I have to share this. Originally, I went online and I went to my Canva, which is where I get a lot of my imagery for my
Yeah,
podcast.
for
And
sure.
I got a photo of the ocean because it was nice. And I was thinking about it because I was looking some more of your background. And I
Hmm.
thought, that is a boring picture. And I remembered I was up in Alaska and I had a chance to just kind of explore, walk around the tide pools, which
Oh,
you give me a chair and a
oh,
camera,
all day.
and I'm a happy guy.
Yeah.
Just and I thought, well, that's a much better picture showing tide pools. But I, lo- I love the fact though, from conservation, whether it's ocean conservation, Great Lakes conservation, freshwater,
Yeah.
the rivers. There's so many facets of conservation and
Hmm.
water conservation that you can literally go anywhere and do anything if you're
Hmm.
creative enough and you're open to moving around. And when I did my series with the National Marine Sanctuaries, and I know
Great
you're connected
organization.
on LinkedIn to John Armour. Uh, to me, it was just fascinating to meet all these people that were passionate about some aspect, education,
Hmm.
the the protection of the animal, the just cleaning of the water so that the animal species could thrive, or even to help the marine sanctuary, some like Mallows Bay, and there I forget the other one, Shipwreck National Marine
Hmm.
Sanctuary
Hmm.
is up in on our Great Lakes, and there's so many facets to go by, but I do get that raising kids
Yeah,
here in Canada, which is not a bad place to be right now.
that's true.
If,
That is true.
but I love the fact though you are still doing work that you're passionate about, but you
Hmm.
found a way to make a connection back into sharing your passion, but also talking to other people who are as passionate as you are.
Well,
Uh,
and just to kind of add to that, it took me a while before I realized this is what I was really good at.
yeah,
I did research, I did consulting, I did government work, I did nonprofit work, and there was always something that didn't really fit in, like, or I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't think I could do the best. I was one of my jobs at Fisheries and Oceans Canada was a database management, like a geographic database management person.
mhm,
It wasn't as exciting as I wanted it to be. And so it was never there. But throughout that process, I only realized this like probably about 5, 6 years ago, was every time like I'm on a boat or I'm in the field, I got to do some field work in with DFO too. The stories that people would say, or if I'm at a conference and the projects I'm hearing people talk about, and I'm like, man, people would love to hear this kind of stuff. My family, my friends, people who always ask me questions about like what should we look out for, like what like it everything's so dismal. Like every time I talk about the oceans or I hear something about the oceans, it's always bad news. These are the projects that I want people to get, and the people that I'm talking to, I want to introduce them to the people that always ask me questions, right? Like John Armour, like he would be a fantastic person to introduce to an audience where you're just like, this is what the Marine Sanctuaries program does. Like this is such an important aspect in the United States. And so that's it didn't once I kind of fell into that and I started to like get momentum in that, I quickly realized I'm like, I was built for this. And I didn't
right.
fully realize it until I went back to University of Guelph where I did my undergraduate.
Mm,
And they asked me to do like a talk. I did actually a friend of mine asked me to do a talk for career. And I was pretty much into podcasting at the time. And afterwards I was talking to an old like a professor that I had when I was an undergraduate. So this is like 15 years later. I'm talking to him and I was telling him how much I liked one of his courses and stuff like that. And he was like, "So how did you get so good at interviewing people?" And I'm like, "What do
mm,
you mean?" And he's like, "Well, I listened to your podcast and you just know what to ask and you're very intuitive and you look like you care or you sound like you care." I'm like, "Well, I do. That's the magic is I'm interested in this stuff." And he was like, "I just don't know how you like, did you have to like build up your skill?" I'm like, "To be honest, no, like I don't know." I was surprised. And but you don't realize what other people think you're good at. You just think that's just what we do. That's how I
right.
conduct myself on a podcast. And that's what he was saying. And so I was like, "Oh, this is really cool." So I kind of fell into it
Mhm,
under my own sort of motivation to do stuff, but it works. Like, and as soon as I started publishing and I started interviewing more and more, I was like, no, I'm increasing this. I went out and I bought like a proper mic. I spent like
mhm.
$500, and then I started to do like I went from one episode a week to 5 episodes a week. Like I just went
5. That's
bonkers. Five episodes at 45 minutes each. And I've
okay.
played around with the frequency. I went back to 3 and then I went to 7 days a week. I was like, I decided I'm going to take this full time. I'm going to go 7 days a week. I'm going to see what happens. And opportunity showed up. It wasn't fully successful, but it really got me out there and people
Mhm,
really started listening and really enjoyed it.
okay. You said something a minute ago about the interviewing and hearing people's stories, and you asked me also before we actually hit the record button, what's this about? What do you want to cover? Do you have an agenda? That is actually what it is. I mean, as a coach, as a recovering IT business consultant, I was used to asking questions. I was a business analyst. I
Right.
would talk about process.
Of course.
Then I realized I can't do this for the rest of my life. I'm going to die alone in a hotel room. And I discovered coaching, and I love the conversation. I love helping people navigate where they are, where they want, and help them get to where they want to be. And that's all coaching. It's all listening. And I think that's the best part about, for me, the podcasting is I get to talk to people about what they're passionate about.
Yes.
And those stories are really the thread throughout most of my episodes. I mean, every
Yeah.
once in a while there's something a little more
Of course.
targeted, but I love just hearing about people and why they do what they do. And we are forget whatever is going on in this world. People are naturally nice and they
Mhm.
want to do the right thing. They want to help others. And I think the podcast medium helps people share their stories, and it helps open up others to want to learn more about what other folks are doing. So when you're talking to all of your guests and what they do, that's creating opportunities not only for them, but for the people who are also listening on the podcast. And so we get to
Absolutely.
be the help facilitate that in a way. So what did you start the How to Protect the Ocean podcast?
So I started recording in 2015, but I
Okay.
actually launched in 2014, and I
Okay.
launched in 2015. So it's been
Okay.
10 years as of June that
Wow.
I've been doing this podcast. It took me a year to launch because I was scared, because at the
Yeah.
time, uh, communication scientists didn't communicate to the general public like this. There was a lot of hesitation on my part because I was afraid of being criticized by my colleagues, by old supervisors and things like that. And also I was worried like I had imposter syndrome. We talked
Right.
a little bit
Yeah.
about it today when you're interviewing another podcaster. Well, when I'm interviewing another scientist, am I going to like know enough for this scientist to tell me something, or this conservationist to tell me something? And am I going to feel like people agree with me, or like, am I on the right track? Is this what people want? Like, there's always those questions that go on. So it took me a while to launch. And plus
Mhm.
at the time I felt it's not as easy to start a podcast as it is today, or
Mhm.
it's more understanding. And it may just be because I'm more into, I love talking about podcasting. As a
Right.
podcaster, you listen to podcasts on podcasting, you're always trying to grow, you're always trying to get better. And so I really got into the medium. So now knowing it more, maybe it's easier to do. I feel like it's easier, but I think it's also easier to do once you understand the
Sure.
concepts and the pillars. But at the time we didn't really talk about science. So I was worried. But then once I launched, I didn't get when you launch, you don't have a huge audience. So I didn't have a huge audience, but it started to slowly kind of grow and
Mhm.
grow. It's a huge, like a very, very slow, like shallow kind of ramp up. And it was great. I fell in love with doing it, as I mentioned, right? Going 5 days a week. I had someone help me out to write all the show notes and stuff like that. I had like a volunteer, and then we actually started to do like an Ocean Talk Friday where he would bring on like episodes, and he would get experience doing that kind of stuff. So Nathan Johnson was on the podcast with me a while. He now works with Oceana. It kind of got him to helped get him to the next level. He's an amazing guy. And so like it just built and built and built. And so I just loved it. Yeah, it's been
Okay.
an amazing journey.
Now, are you still doing 5 a week?
No, 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 no. I do 3. So,
3.
what's interesting is at one point I was doing 5 a week for a while. I still had a full-time job. I was working for DFO at the time. And it was fun to do. I went back to 3 times a week because it was just a little too much.
Right.
And then but they were still 45 minutes each. So I'd cover almost like 3 stories within one episode.
Right.
And that's when Apple Podcasts released its Podcast Connect uh,
Right.
service, I guess you would call it, where you can actually look at the retention of how many people, how far people would look into an episode or
Right.
stay on the episode. And I kept looking, it was like 20 to 30 minutes. And I was like, okay, so if they're staying 20 to 30 minutes, that means there's a good chance that that last show or that last story is not being listened to every time.
Right.
Not to say that it's because of the story. And I even tried to like promote it a little bit more at the beginning, but they just weren't loud. And it could have just been the commute that they were listening on a commute or a dog walk, or it is like
Yes,
dinner.
yeah.
So it could have been a number of different things, but it kept showing up like 50% or like 60% listen. I was like, okay, what if I decide to do the same amount of show, like same amount of cover the same amount of stories, but I just put it like more. Like, so if I do like a 15 to 20-minute episode on one story, and then I'll do it next. So instead of doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I would do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. And then I was like, well, I've got enough to do 9 episodes in a week. Why don't I just do 7 days a week? And they'll be actually recording less. And so I did that. And I did that for quite some time. I probably did that for about a year. And it was great. I enjoyed it. You know, I think that people are like, oh, why do you do it so much? You can probably get away with just doing once a week. And there's so many stories to cover.
Yeah.
There's so much content that I feel like when I see a story, even doing, I do 3 times a week now, even doing 3 times a week, I feel like I'm like, I could do more.
Okay.
I just get burnt out easily now. I'm older now. It's been 10 years.
Oh, yeah. Right around November, that's when I start to feel the burnout, like, okay, I've got to get through this. Because I typically, if I'm working on a project, like I do a lot of series, I need to get those episodes out, but I also occasionally I usually post on Tuesdays and then again on Thursday. So if I try not to do more than 2 a week. Every once in a while, I want to get in there. But I mean, you've got to take care of yourself. I mean, you got the family. I saw the family photo somewhere.
2 kids.
You can't say dad's got work to do. Sorry, kids. But
for sure.
But the people that you have on this podcast, and I love the fact you've got a huge variety of guests. And is there what kinds of themes are you hoping to have come across when you're doing these many episodes? Is there a common thread, or are they just different facets of this big topic of ocean conservation and ocean protection, the wildlife protection?
That's a great question. I don't know if I've ever actually thought about it in like detail to give you like a really good answer on that. But a lot of the times it goes to what interests me and what I think my audience would benefit in knowing. So there are certain times where I will go on like a specific topic. And because I have so many episodes, I might do like a bit of a series where it's like 3 episodes in a row, or like I'll cover a couple of times in a month or something like that, that I think is that people need to know. From an interview perspective, it really depends. If there's a story that just came out or a new research paper that just came out and I want that person to be on it, either the first author or an author or somebody that I know, I'm like, hey, do you want to come on and talk about this? I think this would be a really great story for my audience. They really like to know it. If it's, because I do a mix of solo episodes and interview episodes.
Okay.
And so as I've grown, or as I've continued on, the longer you continue on, the more people reach out to you. I'm sure you still get people reach out to you from emails, and some are like complete misses, and some of them are like dead on. You're like, ooh, this would be really cool, but I never thought about this before. And so when I get those, I'll be like, yeah, let's have you on. And because I do so many episodes, I feel like I can get away with hitting all these different types of topics, because I'm like, why not? If you don't want to listen to that episode, there's one coming out in 2 days, so you don't have to worry about it, or within a couple of days, so you can go on. Or there's so many, like I've done 1,800 episodes, like on this podcast, 1,800 in about 10 years, right? And so there's so many episodes that you can look at. Now, some of them might be out of date because it's like 8 years ago or something like that, if it's a specific topic, but some are relevant. Like some people go back. Like I did an episode with Dr. Naomi Rose, who's an orca biologist and works for like one of the leading U.S. animal rights and welfare groups. And she works a lot with captivity and the science of the captivity of orcas. So when Blackfish came out, I had her on. That was still to this day is probably one of my most popular episodes. And I did that back in 2015, 2016. Like it's so there, and we talked about the science behind it, because a lot of people were questioning the science behind it. And she was one of the advisors. She kind of took part in that. And she was like, no, like this is what we found. And this is how we found it. So we went into more detail that the documentary, which was hugely successful in what it wanted to accomplish, couldn't go into. in an hour and a half or however long it was. And so that was really great. So yeah, I think it's the subject matter comes down to like, is this something that I'm interested in? And is
Okay.
this something that my audience would like? Because if I'm interested in it, I can be very enthusiastic about it. And then I can make it matter to my audience. And at the beginning, like the intros, I'll be like, this is why this matters. This is why I want you to, this is why I'm having this person on, or this is why I'm talking about this specific subject.
Okay. I've had a number of guests that have been on multiple episodes. Usually they've written a new book, and I was like, and
Yeah.
I'm a member of the Outdoor Writers Association of America, so I always want to
Sweet.
support, which by the way, you should consider joining since you're a podcaster,
Yeah.
and conservation is one element of what many of my peers in the organization are working on in some
Hmm.
shape or fashion. But is there a guest that it's like you can always count on them to come on, and they're great for just engagement, good stories, and
Yeah.
your audience is going to be learning something new?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few that I can think of that I've had on multiple times. Dr. Naomi Rose, I haven't had her on for a while, but she's always comes and brings the juicy stuff of science. And
Okay.
because she deals a lot with animal welfare, this is stuff that people need to know. And it's always interesting because whales, you put whale in the title and it's always going to hit, or you put
Mhm.
orca in the title, it's always going to hit. But she's also a very knowledgeable and engaging speaker, so it's really nice to have. There are two that come to mind that I regularly depend on. That's Dr. Andrew Thaler, who is a deep sea ecologist, but
Okay.
has done a lot of work. His PhD was done around like deep sea mining, and he's taken part in a lot of deep sea mining activities. He used to be the editor of a deep sea mining like industry magazine. He's been a spokesperson on kind of on both sides, and he
Mhm.
provides a really good, almost non-biased approach to deep sea mining. Like just to go briefly into it, the people who want to deep sea mine are trying to protect the planet. Is how we present it, right? They're not necessarily trying to destroy the deep sea, but they realize that there's a bigger knowledge of we need to reduce the effects of climate change and climate change itself. So
Mhm.
by taking these nodules out, we are and making these batteries for EVs, we are protecting the planet. Also taking away the dependency of these mines in Africa who are going against a lot of human rights issues and things like that that are hurting people. So, there's that aspect of it. But then there's also like, what are we doing to the deep sea? We have no idea. But then he presents it as this is an opportunity for us to get ahead of the game and put in proper regulations to make sure that deep sea mining is done properly and taking a conservative approach. Will that actually happen? That's the case. That's what we know. But he presents it from a great aspect. So I've had him on a number of times to discuss that. But he's also this tech guy. He's created his own like CTD, like instrumentation, oceanographic instrumentation, to make it easier to buy and more affordable for people who want to know more about their oceans. So small island states who may not be able to afford the $100,000 instrument, but can do it with an instrument that's only $1,000 or
Mhm.
$700. He's worked with a lot of Open ROV. He's working with a company called Open ROV, where at one point James Cameron, the director, bought like 1,000 of those Open ROVs for that company to give away to a lot of these small island states or communities that couldn't afford it on a regular basis. So he would do workshops and teach how to take it apart and put it together so they know how
Mhm.
to maintain these instruments. So he comes on every once in a while, and he just put in a tide gauge in his own little town and made it a community project, because he's also on he's a committee chair for climate change of his town in St. Michael's, Maryland. He does a
Okay.
little bit of everything. So he's got so many things that go on. He's taught Dungeons and Dragons to kids about forest ecology and how that can be a tool for conservation. So just in and of itself with him on, I could talk about so many things. And sometimes he'll just reach out. He's like, "Hey, I did this. You want to talk about it on the podcast?" I'm like, "Yep, the book a time in my calendar and we'll do it." Right. So I can
I
always
love
depend
it.
on him. The other is Angelo Villagomez, who is from the Mariana Islands. And he works in DC in conservation for the Center of American Progress. He used to work for Pew Charitable Trust. One of my good friends. We've gotten to be good friends just by doing these interviews and talking over online. And he always brings great stuff. He used to work in shark conservation. He used to travel around to a lot of the different Pacific Islands as someone to work with other Pacific Islanders, to listen to their local communities, what they want, and provide that type of workshop. And he's just great with people, great speaker. So he's brought not only information to him as a guest, but he's also brought other people that I should interview. Just as you mentioned just kind of before, I got somebody you just have on your podcast. He's the same thing. Like, I'll go to him and I'll be like, hey, I saw this article that you shared. Love to have you on to discuss it. He's like, no, I'm not the person you want. Here's the person you want. I'll contact her or him, and then we'll have you on we'll have them on the podcast. And almost like their trust in him puts trust in,
Sure.
and so that I get guests from that area as well. And like, not just like individual guests, like guests from like the Blue Nature Alliance, which is like Conservation International and Pew Charitable Trust and all these huge organizations. So it's brought me a lot of credibility within the space.
Oh, I love it. And one thing it's really evident, even though I have conservation in the intro or stewardship exploration, I have literally not even scratched the surface, because you're mentioning these organizations like, oh, that's interesting.
That's so many.
So, wow. And I think in some ways that gives me hope that we truly care enough about our oceans and conservation, no matter where we're at, that things are going to turn out well. So I mean, I think in this day and age here, at least here in the US, have to have some hope.
Absolutely. Optimism
But
is a huge thing. It's an important part to have in conservation. Working in conservation is not easy. There's a lot of battles that we lose. And
yeah,
especially looking at the States right now, with a lot of the environmental regulations being repealed and the EPA being pretty much dismantled at every so level, NOAA and the National Weather Service and so forth, and getting their budgets cut. It's a hard time. And this is not like, I mean, although this is a hard time in this respect, there's a lot of hard times that a lot of these conservationists and scientists go through, because you could have the best science and present the best material, like a negative trend in the ocean, but then nothing gets done about it. And that's a difficult part. And to be honest, the role that I play, like if you look at just sort of I always talk about this is in terms of the conservation machine, right?
mm-hmm.
You have the scientists who identifies the problem. They're out there on the front lines. They identify a problem, a trend using the scientific process, which is an important part. So they come in and they say, we have a problem, or we don't have a problem, but we have a problem in a monitoring program or something like that. And that scientist could be part of government. It could be part of an NGO. It could be an individual. It could be an academic. It could be a private consultant. They identify the problems. Then that problem gets picked up by a nonprofit organization, like an environmental organization, like non-governmental organization, or sometimes government organization. And they realize that there's a problem here. So they have to make a decision of how best to present it to the decision makers or to the policy makers, to say, hey, we need to amend this policy or change it or create a policy because it's something new that's come up and we need to do something about it. But you're not going to get the buy-in unless you have the people that are supporting them. And that could be individuals like you and I, who may not have a normal say or may not know about this problem. So that's where the nonprofit organizations really play, and the advocates and the activists really play a big role. The podcasters, the marketers and stuff like that, where they actually present it to the individual, their constituents, their audience, and say, hey, there's this problem here that's happening, or the government's changing this policy because they want to develop on this land that's going to affect a lot of things, including the ocean or including the lakes, but you don't know about it. They're going to get away with it. But if we speak up, and if we follow this process, they have to listen to us. And so that's where the communication happens. But where I step in is the communication part, because a lot of people don't have the access to this information, and not necessarily from a barrier perspective, although that happens often, but they're just not aware of it because there's so much competition for information. I mean, the podcast industry, everybody's downloads are down these days because there's so many other podcasters that are coming in different podcasts. Everybody has a podcast, but although not enough people have a podcast in certain ways. But it's the competition for information. You have TV and reality TV and sports and all this coming at you, and you're like, I want to be entertained, or I want to do this, I want to do that. And then so when something negative comes at you and you have to do something, you may not want to do that, whether it's a behavioral change and using less plastic, or picking better seafood, more having that information to pick it. My role is to provide that information. So if people want to know how to, one of my taglines is how to live for a better ocean. I provide you the information so you can make that decision yourself. If you listen to my podcast and you just say, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to do that. Although I have that information, that's fine. Right. My goal is to provide you with that information so you can make that decision.
Well, and I love the fact that a podcast like yours is a resource. So if I need information, chances are Andrew's talked about this or had a guest on that could speak to it.
Yeah.
Or if I think it's important, I can go to Andrew and say, Andrew, I think this is an important topic worth speaking about.
Yeah.
You might want to consider it.
Absolutely.
And that's for me, that's the power of the podcast, because as you said, there's so much competition for our attention. And
Yeah.
it gets back to like, why are your listeners dropping off after 20 minutes? Because it's true. It's the commute. It's the walk the dog. I need to do a quick exercise and then I'm off doing something else. But if I can consistently 3 times a week provide helpful information to someone who and it educates them, and they can then potentially decide, do I want to support this initiative? And the whole idea around the ocean conservation is really, unless you're a certain person on the East Coast, who doesn't want to protect the ocean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the thing. It's a common thing. And actually, unfortunately, he's passed away recently in the last couple of years. But Dr. Wallace J. Nichols wrote a book called The Blue Mind, and it really changed the way a lot of people saw how important the ocean was. And the idea behind the book is he was a sea turtle biologist, a marine biologist. He was actually one of the first people who were part of the team that put a tag on a sea turtle and realized that these sea turtles go from like Baja, California, all the way to Japan. So cutting edge kind of stuff. And he was always different in the way he did things. He pursued things, and communication was a big part of that. He wrote a book called Blue Mind, which was basically teaming up with neuroscientists and saying, hey, there's a reason why we always want to go to the water when we go on vacation. There's a reason why the color blue is so popular with people. We go there because blue, from a neuroscience perspective, is relaxing. And when people go out, so when you want to go to a Caribbean island or the Pacific, Hawaii or something like that, or Fiji, and you want to relax on the beach and stare out into the ocean, it's because it relaxes your mind. And it's like neuroscientifically proven that it does that. And there's a number of other reasons why he lists out in that book. I highly recommend that book because it's and he not only wrote the book, but he had workshops on it and stuff like that. He even teamed up with Jack Johnson. Like Jack Johnson was a big fan of his. I'm sure it was mutual, but that's what he really talked about. And I think it was it really clarified the act for me. Was like, people love the ocean. Doesn't matter if you're on one side of the aisle politically or the other. People love the ocean. People like to fish. People like to go out and scuba dive. People like to snorkel, just swim. Some people don't even like being in the ocean, but like being around the ocean, right? They're afraid of the critters that are in there. I get it. I totally get it. Some people will spend all day in a tide pool and just look at critters and stuff like that. You never know what people love to do or what people don't, but ocean is always that common strain that just like, hey, like, let's enjoy this part by the ocean. And so I think that's like a big part of it. And it helps to bring people on in a podcast where I try not to judge. I call things out when I see it, but I try not to judge the people who are doing it because I don't want to isolate a specific audience. Like if everything is so politically divided, we see people who are like podcasters, even like interviews, like Howard Stern just got his show canceled. Not sure if it was because he wanted to retire, but it said it was canceled. A lot of people are speculating it's because he came out and he said, anybody who voted for the president that's in, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And of course that isolates potentially half of America. And so his ratings I don't know for sure, have taken a dip because of it. I was actually an audience member actually told me one time, he's like, because I kind of came out and talked about this in Trump's first presidency. And they said, well, maybe you shouldn't talk about it from that type of political way because you might isolate your audience. Because there are a lot of people who voted Republican last election or voted conservative here in Canada that still love the ocean. They still love the environment. May want to protect it, but they have other issues that they want to vote for whatever that might be. And to
Right.
all of a sudden come in, and this is, I don't judge anybody who does the opposite or anything like that. But for me, it was like, I just want to present the information from a scientific and conservation perspective as a way of, my goal is always to protect the ocean,
Mhm.
right? And the
And
people around it. That's how I
and
prove.
that is a consistent angle where there is very little gray area. I
Right.
want to present the science,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
with this particular goal, and
Yeah.
I love that. I My episodes will tend to stretch every once in a while. I try
Oh,
to
me
stay.
too. Yeah, for sure.
But hey, before we head out, I wanted to ask you a question. I noticed
Yeah.
that you have established a podcast network, Speak Up for Blue.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
So that the network has taken, uh, some turns. I think I think when you think of a network and your audience thinks of a network, like a podcast network now, they think of like this machine that has a number of different podcast shows on it,
Mhm.
and they work collectively, and they probably get paid through that network, through advertisements and things like that. And they probably prop each other up. They probably advertise on each other's shows. And originally that was the goal, the eventual goal for the podcast network that I found. But when I first started podcasting, I would go to conferences and I would talk how I wanted more people to podcast. And then people were asking like, Andrew, why are you doing this? You're just going to create competition for yourself. And I'm like, no, we need more podcasters talking about the ocean. We need people who do not look like me or do not sound like me to talk about the ocean. We need people who look like me and sound like me, because everybody, as Howard, like everybody that's listening in your audience has a particular person or podcast host, maybe, let's say, that they connect with. And
Mhm.
some people will connect with me and some people will connect with other people. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't want to just say, I don't want anybody else to podcast because I want everybody to listen to me. What if you don't connect with me? You're not going to listen to me. There's enough podcasts out there that you want to learn the banjo, you can learn on a podcast, how to do that. So I wanted more and more people to podcast. So as that was happening, people like, I want to start a podcast. How do I do that? And so I was like, look, I'm a scientist. It's all about, and conservationist, it's all about collaboration. So when I first started, I said, I'll tell you what, I will pay for your hosting if you create the content. And like, all right, cool. And I'm like, we'll have like a bit of a network where the network wasn't necessarily it wasn't for financial reasons. It was more to support each other. Let's
Right.
prop each other up. Let's support each other on. Like, I had trouble with it, as I mentioned, with the technology of how to start it, this and that. So I'll help you with that. I'll teach you whatever you need to know. If you ever want to get off my account, that's fine. Like, no problem. But we had a bit of a network and we were promoting each other as we go on. And we had some great shows. We had Marine Conservation Happy Hour. We had a show called Dugongs and Sea Dragons. Both of them are still on. They're just off our quote unquote network, but they're still going. And it was just great. We had a lot of people who really enjoyed podcasting. Marine Mammal Science, which is pretty self-explanatory what that was. Madame Curie, which was like a women in science kind of podcast, and documenting the history of women in science. And so there's a lot of different types of podcasts. We had a Constancia Azul, which is like the Spanish version of how to protect the ocean. So we had a lot of these different shows. So I was like, let's just call ourselves a network. But we
Mhm.
didn't have like a website that had all of those necessarily. I would do it on like my Twitter page at the time, and then have all the cover arts and all that kind of stuff. But it was very loose, and I got so busy doing my own stuff, as 7 episodes and even 3 episodes is busy enough. Plus working full time, plus being a hockey coach and a football coach and a parent and all this kind of stuff. It it was just too much, and I couldn't focus on it. So we kind of disbanded, or a lot of us disbanded, and I kind of just started over.
Okay.
I have the How to Protect the Ocean podcast, which is what I call is sort of like the flagship, what started it all. And
Mhm.
now I co-host another podcast, which is an old guest of mine, Dr. David Ebert, called Beyond Jaws. And it's all about like shark careers and how people have done their careers and what kind of research they've been into and all that kind of stuff. And he's a guy who's been in the been in shark science for since the 1970s. And we call them the Jaws generation. And we've had great episodes on there. So it's back to those two shows. But now I'm more focused. And I have a plan of how I want to get this. This is be more financial because I want to do this full time. but also expand the podcast, but also have a little bit more control and like own the IP. Like I'll create the podcast myself and then pay hosts to host it. So if one wants to host for a long time, that person will get paid accordingly. If they can't do it, because that was the problem I was having, is the consistency wasn't there, like my podcast. So I wanted the consistency to continue on. So if that person can't do it for whatever reason, they're doing a PhD or they're doing something else, I can bring in someone else and pay them. But I hold the IP because I want the subject matter to get out. I want people to enjoy it and continue to have it for years to come, just like How to Protect the Ocean and like Beyond Jaws. Beyond Jaws, I think we're in our 4th year of doing that podcast. So it's a lot more business strategy like than let's just all support each other. And it's kind of like it was a lot more chaotic.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think it's a great place for folks to come and consume good content, valuable content at their leisure. And rather than trying, I mean, I can do a Google search and look for podcasts now on the outdoor space or conservation space, but I
Yeah.
love the fact that you're bringing people together. In the interest of time, I'm sure we could continue to go on. I know let's see, it's 4 o'clock here in Las Vegas, so it's probably dinner time right now.
Yeah. The stomach's grumbling a little bit.
Stomach's grumbling. So, and I know I don't want to get between you and quality dinner time with the kids and the
Yeah.
wife, but if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places to go?
Well, the best place would go to the website. So that's speakupforblue.com, which is something of interest is that's what this podcast used to be called, Speak Up for Blue. So it's Speak Up for Blue. It's not the number, it's FOR blue.com. And if you go there, you'll find Beyond Jaws. You'll find a couple of other podcasts that we've played around with, but you'll find How to Protect the Ocean as well. And all of our episodes, like 1,800 episodes. Beyond Jaws, I think we're just over 100. There's quite a number of episodes to be on there. So lots to listen to.
Excellent. And I know we've got your social sites like Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So we'll provide backlinks.
Also on YouTube.
I
I got into video podcasting, believe it or not.
I did notice there on the PodMatch page, there was also a TikTok. I cannot get my head around TikTok. We're on YouTube as well. If I'm doing a destination or a chamber of commerce, or depending on the type of guest, we'll do a tour of their website.
Oh yeah, of course.
A lot of content, and that all goes up like this episode will go up on YouTube.
Awesome.
As well. By the way, I need more photos than just your smiling face. So
oh yeah, we'll send you some.
All right. So I love it. Listen, Andrew, it's a great pleasure to have you on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I certainly enjoyed learning more about you and your work, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime. So thank you so much for spending time today.
Howard, thank you so much for having me on. I had a blast. This has been so much fun to be able to talk about a subject that I'm very near and dear to, obviously, but it's just great to share with your audience. I really appreciate it.
Sounds good. Listen, stay in the line. We're going to do a quick close and you and I can have a final chat. Okay.
Perfect.
All right, folks, we've just been chatting with Andrew Lewin, marine biologist. He's an employee of the Canadian government doing cool things to add data and content out into the conservation space, so making a difference there. And he is the host of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast and also affiliated with the Speak Up for Blue podcast network. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode. My God, he dropped a lot of names. We'll get as many of those into our show notes as possible with links, especially this book, The Blue Mind. And I think I have a mind to make a couple introductions for him to some future guests that he can have on his podcast. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Such an important topic, conservation, the ocean. And I love the fact, the color blue, because I love just sitting by the ocean, looking at the horizon and the blue water, and I just realized my logo, Outdoor Adventure Series, is blue, and I'm wearing blue. He's wearing blue. I mean, who knew? This is great. Listen, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Do check us out on our website, outdooradventureseries.com. We are also on LinkedIn and Facebook on our Outdoor Adventure Series pages. The video of this episode will be up on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can find this episode wherever you get your podcast from. And if you are on sites like Apple and Spotify, or even on our website, we love comments, especially likes and sharing. And let us know what you thought, okay? So, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a fantastic day, and we look forward to having you join us on a future episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care.